Hi, I'm Professor Beck Strah.
And I'm Professor Eric Bronson, and you're listening to Prison Breakdown.
2, 3, break!
Hate to spoil his fun, but we're gonna bust out of here.
2, 3, break!
You're locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
2, 3, break!
I can honestly say I'm a changed man. No danger to society here. God's honest truth.
2, 3, break!
I'm not leaving this cell. I'll get out my way. The right way.
2, 3, break!
Ahoy, dudes! Welcome back to another episode of Prison Breakdown. We are in movie May-nute for the month of May. And so we will be discussing some of your favorite prison films today. Let me kick it over to my co-host, Eric, Dr. Eric Bronson. Welcome, sir.
Welcome. Happy May. In this time when things are supposed to warm up, we're still in the 40s, damn it. I'm starting to get angry.
What's happening, dude?
We don't see the sun. What the hell is this? It's like living in Seattle.
Can we discuss something about so here's two May memes I hate. I hate one. I hate it's gonna be May. It's gonna be May. I hate that. Mm-hmm. Also, May the 4th be with you. Like, come on. It's the dumbest. We should get rid of Star Wars Day. Abolish Star Wars Day. Let's put it out there. What do you think?
Really? Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah. You're trying to earn some enemies out there, aren't you?
I don't care. The pod needs to be controversial.
Well, it's like when you insult a Star Trek fan with some Star Wars stuff, and they get all mad. It's not even the same movie.
Let's pass it over. Let's pass that one over to producer Brit, who also hosts a Star Trek podcast.
Yeah. So Star Wars and Star Trek are the exact same thing. Most people don't know this. Exact same thing. Zero difference. Everyone's like, well, one's fantasy and one's hard sci-fi. No, it's all fantasy. None of that's ever gonna happen. Get out of here.
All right, these are controversial statements, but that's fine. Controversy sells, as you know.
I can't. I'm only saying this because I cannot say it on my other podcast, or we will get canceled in our community.
No, I just love when you have somebody who's they just love one or the other, or they love both, and you say something like along the lines of, well, why doesn't if this was so fantastic, why didn't Spock and Chewbacca team up? And they just lose their ever. They're like, they're not the same. They can't handle that.
Yeah.
I for one would like to see a Spock Chewbacca buddy film.
Yeah. Yeah. Spock Baka. Yeah, I ship that.
Chew Spocka.
There you go. That's the one.
Yeah.
I think it's got legs. I think there's some fan fiction out there waiting for the worlds to collide.
It already exists. Like if you put together two characters, there's already a fan fiction of them. Somewhere out there.
What was the beep?
What was that?
Fan fiction is oftentimes very sexually explicit, so we're not going to talk about Spock and Chewbacca doing things. No one wants to hear that.
I'm glad you let us in on your little inside joke there.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Eric, shall we kick it over to the news?
Absolutely.
All righty, time for some news from the Razor Wire. Fresh news, hot off the razor wire.
All right, just in, MS-13 gang leader who prosecutors say turned D.C. area into hunting ground, sentenced to life in prison. So that's our headline with calling something the hunting grounds is quite interesting. But according to this article from CBS News, the violent world of MS-13 street gangs, the killings in Northern Virginia in the summer of 2019 really stood out. In that year, the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area became an MS-13 hunting ground, in the words of the prosecutor. So I find it quite interesting that that's what they're talking about. But the article continues, where law enforcement had become accustomed to MS-13 killings involving rival gang members, or ones in which MS-13 members themselves became victims when suspicions arose that they were cooperating with police. What was new, prosecutors say, was the victims were chosen at random with no connection to MS-13 or any other gang. Now, this is something that I've heard about. So first, for our listeners out there that don't know, years ago, Washington, D.C.'s city prison system was taken over by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So when they did that, all of the inmates in D.C. then moved into the Bureau of Prisons prison system, and they flushed them out throughout the country, trying to disorganize their gangs. And so they sent inmates to Virginia and Georgia and Florida and Colorado, all over the country, trying to disrupt the gang. And for the most part, it seems that MS-13 had lost a lot of its oomph in the prison system because they were just spread out. What is interesting is talking with former employees of the Bureau of Prison who can talk about this sort of thing because they no longer work there. What really stands out about MS-13 is just what this article talked about in random violence. So as one of the things that we could probably do an episode on is non-random violence in prison and how that helps reinforce the inmate code and the statuses that exist. One of the things that MS-13 was doing was arriving at prisons and immediately becoming violent randomly. And that shakes up the inmate social structure, the hierarchy, and obviously causes issues with the staff who work there. So that's why they part of the reason why they become so feared is that it's goes at random. And we know Hollywood likes to make us think that the violence in prison is pretty random, and you have to worry about it every 30 seconds being shanked or raped or whatever might be going on inside prisons. But normally inside this world, everybody knows when the fight is going to happen. Everybody knows when a hit's going to go down. With the MS-13 members flooding into the Federal Bureau of Prisons and being spread out, they weren't able to really keep the same prison rules in existence, and so they became feared because of that. Now, this folks that I talked to said one thing that will bring a whole inmate population together is the existence of an MS-13 member showing up in their prison, because they all have a social structure that they agreed on that has been there, a hierarchy that's been there, and then somebody or a few members of a gang show up and start to disrupt it, and they will band together to kind of squash the MS-13's members' power at a new prison. So it's very interesting to talk to these folks who have worked in the Federal Bureau of Prison about what MS-13 is doing. But anyways, back to the article. This gang leader, Melvin Saldana, whose orders were to set off the killings, was sentenced to life in prison, as was another gang member convicted of carrying out one of them. A third member was sentenced to 14 years in prison, and he was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, but was acquitted of carrying out the killing himself. So that is the big news, hot off the press for our razor wire news of the week. So it's very interesting to see how prosecutors talk about things being a hunting ground and a war zone. If things we can look at DC's rate of murder and see whether or not if things were any worse. But when we have somebody who's a gang member in such a infamous group such as MS-13, it's easy for prosecutors to pick up on things like, it's a hunting ground or a war zone, and it's because of them. And I think it's hard for us to say that any part of our country is a war zone or a hunting ground. I don't think we've gotten to that point, but
yeah, that's super interesting. And it's interesting that they're being treated as such a homogenized group where an MS-13 gang member enters your prison. They're always expected to do the same thing every time in terms of like random violence, right?
Right.
Is it can't be 100% of the time this happens, though.
No, it's not. Definitely not. I think, and when it came to the other gang members they were killing, it's, that's completely non-random.
Yeah.
Those are planned out and carried out. It really is. It's interesting to look at this gang and to see how I think that the equivalent to them is, if we look back in history, we had Hell's Angels back in the 70s and 80s who were put in the same type of category where it's just mentioning them and people get nervous. Now I don't know that in 40 years from now, 50 years from now, MS-13 is going to be doing blockades of the West Baptist or the West Baptist or the Westboro Baptist Church in Topeka, Kansas, when they protest a funeral of a veteran. I don't see them doing that, but because that's what the Hells Angels do nowadays. And some people they love the Hells Angels.
Wait, the Hells Angels have like turned into a hate group like that? Is that what you're saying?
No. So what they do is, the Westboro Baptist Church goes and they protest the funerals of our veterans or our members in the military who die, and they hold up these awful signs of God hates fags and all kinds of horrible things. And what the Hells Angels do is they go and they stand in between the Westboro Baptist Church members and the people who are attending the funeral, so that the people in the funeral do not have to see the signs.
That's awesome.
And so all of a sudden, the Hells Angels, who are doing things like, hey, we're having a teddy bear sale, they're doing a great job of repairing their public image by doing these things while still bringing in all kinds of drugs from Canada into the U.S.
Sure,
So,
but they are like, socially they become the good guys because they're this like mitigating force between the much worse and general people.
No, it's great. It's great damage control.
Yeah, this is like PR wizardry.
Exactly. If they can figure it out, why can't Lorena Bobbitt figure it out?
Yes.
I saw her. She was going to visit the encampments on campuses, and the students started chanting Beetlejuice at her.
Oh no! You were thinking of Lauren Boebert.
All right, cut that. Go back and cut that.
No, absolutely not. That stays.
No,
in.
you have to.
Beetlejuice, was that the name of John Wayne Bobbitt's?
Will it reappear if he says it 3 times? The ghost reappears.
That joke is too good.
No, you can't do that.
I'm sorry. I'm not taking that out.
No, you have to.
And in fact, that's going to be the entire episode, is just that joke.
Just on repeat.
Yeah.
Your follow-up joke was too good, and now people won't have context if we take it out.
Well, you got to take it all out. Cut it all, please.
just like Lorena Bobbitt did.
Yeah. Lauren Boebert, excuse me.
Yeah. Well.
All right. Shall we move on to the crux of the episode?
Please, quickly.
But first, I'd like to take a quick stop and shout out an advertisement for our beloved sponsor, Roger Williams University School of Justice Studies.
Yeah.
For all of your criminal justice needs.
Yeah.
Eric, can you tell me briefly, what kind of programs do we have at the Roger Williams School of Justice Studies?
So the School of Justice Studies is uniquely positioned in having criminal justice, forensic science, legal studies, and cybersecurity all in one-stop shop. So when you have any desire for educational advancement, you can turn to Roger Williams University and get educated about all aspects of the justice system.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a place I'd like to be.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know that it's right on this gorgeous campus sitting here on the bay, oh, it's beautiful. Even when it's cool, you get to look out there on that ocean. Just fantastic.
It's something I've never seen a campus quite like it. I from my interview day one, I was here. I was taken aback, and right on the ocean, it is like nothing else you've seen before on a campus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful
simply
campus.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're even mildly interested in criminal justice, just come out here, take a stroll. Why not? What do you have to lose? It's a beautiful day for a walk.
Yeah.
And you get professors like Bronson, like myself. if you care at all about this podcast,
Right.
then I don't know. Right, give our classes a shot.
Exactly. Come visit.
Come visit. We'd like to meet you.
All right. Great advertisement, everybody.
Thank you.
No.
It was a first take, but not bad.
That works great.
All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about some prison films. It's movie May-nute.
Yes.
Indeed. Should I play the theme?
Yeah, please do. I love that theme. I think about it all the time.
All right. May.
60 seconds with producer Brit to talk about movies.
Because it's 60 minutes rather than 60 seconds.
That's true. Should we put the 60 minutes tick, 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 tick?
Over the whole episode.
Yeah. I can be
Now,
Andy Rooney. That's cool.
I've always thought of you as an Andy Rooney.
Yeah, I complain about everything. So
Yeah, like water bottles. What's up with him? Like he's got like the corner.
back in
on
my
everything.
day, we used to use the whites only drinking fountain.
All right. So, harkening back to the civil rights era, in the late 60s, 1967 to be precise, we're met with a film called Cool Hand Luke, which we will be talking about today. Cool Hand Luke is based off the book titled Cool Hand Luke by Don Pierce. And the author had done some hard time, working on a chain gang out of a Florida prison. He was serving time for safecracking and counterfeiting charges. Interestingly, the film itself was not shot in Florida. It was shot in Stockton, California. But the set that we see in the film was built based on pictures that a crew had taken from the prison where Don Pierce did his time in Gainesville, Florida, sent them out to some producers in California. And for this film, they built a mess hall. They built dog kennels, barracks, a warden's house, and a guard shack. And apparently, after they had built all these buildings, a building inspector was walking around and stumbled upon the set, and he mistook the housing that they built for migrant worker accommodations. And he noted several code violations and declared the buildings condemned. That's my favorite piece of trivia about the film. It's very weird.
No.
There's also some modern day trivia related to Cool Hand Luke that's quite interesting. If you ever are wandering around, California, there are restaurants. There's a restaurant chain, Cool Hand Luke's.
Really? What do they serve?
Yeah.
What's the
It's
style?
a steakhouse, of course. A steakhouse. You figure, if you look at them, you figure, okay, there's got to be some boiled eggs in here.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like a high point of the film. And is there even a boiled egg on this menu?
I don't. If you look at ordering, you don't see anything stick out that relates to the other than just the whole image. The image of Cool Hand Luke is the whole thing, but nothing where you can order a hard-boiled egg or 50 of them if you so desire.
Now, our film, Cool Hand Luke, unrelated to the restaurant apparently, except in name, It follows a man named Lucas Jackson, who is arrested for maliciously destroying municipal property while under the influence. And the film starts out, this guy is cutting the heads off of parking meters, presumably to take the change. I was thinking about this while it happened. And someone cutting the heads off parking meters, it would never happen in present day because we have all our parking meters are fitted with credit card readers now.
Right.
So what would be the modern day equivalent of cutting the heads from parking meters?
I don't know.
Oh, you know those like pay to park places where you can shove cash in the box? Maybe like breaking open one of those, or like stealing from a vending machine or something like that.
Oh yeah. Vending machine. That's good.
Yeah, it's tough because like parking, everything's gone digital. You download an app.
Right.
That's a tough one. I don't know that there is anything that can, but I love how they make them seem just so wacky for doing this, and it's you get a sense right from the get-go that part of this has to do with it's entertaining to him to go saw off these parking meter heads, and is he doing it for the money or just shits and giggles?
Yeah, I get the impression when the cops pull over and they stop him, he's grinning at them. He acts like this is all in fun, and so it's like he doesn't even take this seriously. And like when asked what he thought would happen later on, he goes, "I guess I wasn't thinking, Captain."
Yeah. But that's I think enough people in society that are trying to correct wrongdoings of any type ask people, well, why did you do it? I don't know. I wasn't really thinking, and definitely wasn't thinking about the consequences of my action.
Yeah, especially if you're under the influence, like he is.
Right.
Maybe far away from you to do this. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't do this otherwise. We don't know. His character is left as like, I don't know. I feel like we get to know him to a certain degree, but he's still fairly unpredictable by the end. I read a fair amount about this film, and the main interpretation people seem to pull away from it is it's about the triumph of the human spirit and not letting prison get you down, that kind of thing. And sure, I could see that, but I'm not sure what to take away from it. What was the overall takeaway from you two about it? So with that question, let me preface it to the audience by saying, yes, this man gets arrested for cutting heads off parking meters and sentenced to work in a prison camp on a chain gang. Sorry. So what was your interpretation of the film?
Me?
So go ahead, Brit.
I don't know. I took a lot of like religious imagery from this film. I don't know about y'all.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of like Christian themes in there just because like, prison film in the 1960s, you're going to have a ton of Christian themes. But, I saw Luke as almost like a martyr at some points. And, he takes a lot of undue punishment and he keeps on like getting sentenced to like worse and worse time and worse like chain gang stuff. Because, he was only sentenced there, I think, for 2 years initially, but they keep on upping his time because he keeps on trying to escape and keeps on getting involved in, like, tomfoolery. I kind of saw him as, like, a martyr kind of saint, maybe almost Jesus figure, at least, like, near the end of the film.
Even earlier in the film, like, after he eats all the eggs, he's laying on a picnic table and the barracks is spread out in a crucifixion pose. And I was like, oh, this is the most Christ-like imagery we can get. And when he's fighting Dragline, he's taking the punches. He's hitting back, but not really. Like he keeps getting knocked down. He keeps getting back up. And that felt like some kind of, I wasn't sure exactly what to tie it to, but it felt like religious iconography to me.
You mentioned Dragline. Should we talk about George Kennedy's performance in this film? Because it is wonderful.
He is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are several performances in this movie that are really good, but he just does a fantastic job. Mm-hmm. But my reaction to the film is a little bit different than that. I see a lot of this, and obviously this is because of the eye on punishment and corrections that we have. I focus more on just the pure attempt to try to disrupt redundancy of just being put through mind-numbing work without anything that you actually produce. So so much of the movie I saw, and it was he was looking for anything to break up what the norm was of each day, the routine, and just how mundane that was. But he was also trying to entertain the other inmates, trying to win them over, which I think was a major theme of the movie, because he starts to lose them. And then, of course, when it looks like they break him, right?
Yeah.
And then he ends up, winning him back after that. So I really see that as just, here's an individual that sees himself as almost comic relief for the entire inmate population, and doing things just so that there's something different. We look, if we look at maybe these inmates that we have in solitary confinement for a long time, like, why do they destroy the toilet? Why do they try and flood their cell?
Why do they try and fight the COs?
Right. And granted, this is a very different level. Why did he fight Dragline? Why did he eat 50 eggs or even attempt it? Just the fact that he, that I love it. I can eat 50 hard-boiled eggs. They can't. Nobody can. And then I don't know. Towards the end of that scene, and they're getting there to it, my stomach is turning every time I watch it. It is so, I just, it's almost like you can smell the eggs as he's trying to eat them all. It's so damn good.
Yeah.
I want to touch on some of the prison elements of it too. Now, like the orientation for inmates. In a regular orientation, you might get a rule book. You might be told, okay, wake up time is this time. This is meal time. Lights out at this time. You have access to the library, classes, jobs, stuff like that. But here, they're just getting told what not to do. So we've got Carr, the floor walker, this guy who resides in their bunkhouse, and he's telling them, don't do this, don't do that, or you're going to spend a night in the box. And compared to our modern day orientations, it's really overly simplistic. It's not quite what we see. What did you two think?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty inhumane, a lot of the stuff they did. You mentioned the box, which was their form of solitary confinement, but it is a outdoor wooden box with just a little cage for air to come through in the hot Florida sun. So it's far, far worse than any cell you're going to get in a jail that's climate controlled. And it seemed very inhumane to me, and definitely bordering cruel and unusual torture.
Yeah, and I think I gotta wonder if how often this was used, because that this wasn't just something that popped into some producer or editor or writer's head, that this existed somewhere, obviously in the United States, throughout the South, but also where else has this been used throughout the world? If we look at, was this something that was used in the Vietnam War by either side? It's just there. I think this was something that we've used where we've taken boxes where people don't fit in them properly, and we make them get cramped and unable to move in really uncomfortable conditions. And just to make them suffer so that we can get them to admit to something or to change their behavior, or, again, as that was what was trying to get them to break so that they would be good inmate who would follow the rules.
Yeah. They're trying to break the mind, break the spirit. It's less about punishment has entered this phase where it's less about physical punishment, and it's more about this mental punishment, this psychological torture, so that it's still permissible by constitutional law, right? Like
Right.
it's wild what they're doing to people, and there are physical effects because you are in a literal box in the hot Florida sun, and it is inhumane by present day standards.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'd say any standards, but
Yeah.
it was this was back before the Supreme Court ruled on a lot of this stuff. So
Indeed. So that was the primary punishment that we see, besides shackling someone in extra chains for rule breaking or trying to escape. They also illustrate prison rules throughout the film in terms of like going after people for escaping, or inmates have to ask the bosses, the corrections officers. They have to ask them before they do anything. So they even want to take off their shirt. Taking off my shirt, boss. I want to wipe my glasses. Wiping off my glasses, boss. And so I thought it did a really good job in terms of like showing the level of obedience that inmates were expected to demonstrate at that time.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that was highly characteristics of the Southern prison systems that existed. I don't, obviously inmates call the people who work in prisons boss. All over the place, but it was far more common down south. And I don't know if when you worked, if you ever heard boss at all.
All the time.
Where you were in a prison. I know it's much more common. Whenever I'd go to prisons in the South, I could hear them calling the staff boss, or whatever. The prison I was at, we got called cap. Everybody got called cap for captain. So boss was not in, but it's also, I know, one of the things that is very common and when you hear people outside, in the real world, and they call everybody boss often, that there's a good chance they had been locked up and done a little bit of time.
Yeah, it's an interesting shortcut.
Yeah.
It's like a prison shorthand, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's actually where the wrestler, the Big Boss Man, got his name. He was a former corrections officer, and he was called that as a corrections officer because he was also a big guy. And so he just took that to wrestling with him.
That's fantastic.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that. Thank you. That's a good piece of trivia. Now, I do want to say this movie is so much hornier than I remember. There's this woman washing a car at one point. Dragline refers to her as Lucille. Oh, she must be Lucille. She looks like a Lucille.
Oh, yeah.
That's my best dragline impression.
Pretty good.
But she's like looking over to them, like she knows she's arousing this whole crowd of inmates, and dude continues talking about her whenever and goes to bed, and Luke's like, shut up. And there's a couple points in the movie where like they'll read a horny book out loud. It is like, I think it would potentially be realistic to the era in that way. What do you guys think?
No, the thing that really got me with the horniness of the film was there's a point where Luke escapes and sends them back a magazine with a picture of him with two girls who are like in dresses. And Dragline has the magazine and starts charging the other inmates just to look at the picture.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
That feels like a thing.
Which is incredibly horny, just charging someone. And he's charging a high price, too. He's like, like a half a box of cigarettes to just look at a picture for a second to burn it into your memory.
Yeah. That was interesting.
Yeah.
But it's an example of how we would see like an underground economy in prison where things work on a barter system like that, where I do something for you. I show you this picture even, and you give me a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Now, Eric, I know you're an expert on the inmate code. Did you see many examples of the inmate code presenting itself here?
Yeah, I would definitely say, there was, first off, most important inmate code, us versus them.
Yeah.
Inmates, a lot of inmate solidarity throughout the movie made a lot of sense, making sure you don't snitch on anybody. That idea of it's mind over matter. Luke, his character really epitomized this idea of it's mind over matter, where he was just doing anything he could to mentally beat the situation or to get the inmates' minds off of where they were at and how horrible the situation was. So yeah, there's a whole lot there, from the inmate code that you see in this movie. So it's a good
see
one.
Luke is like trying to rise above it all, like playing like he's too cool for it. Like he comes off like very aloof at some points. Like people are not openly showing emotion. Like when his mom comes to visit for the last time, and he knows that she's dying, and we don't see him show a shred of emotion afterward. And later, even when he finds out she died, he sits on his bunk and he looks sad and plays guitar and or banjo, I suppose. And people leave him alone, but there's no open display of emotion outside of his facial expression.
But at the same time, there's like this understanding between the prisoners and like the solidarity. Like when they come in and tell him his mom's died, like everyone just like leaves the bunkhouse as much as they can. They're not allowed to leave the bunkhouse, but they all like migrate to like a corner and just let Luke have like all of the space he can. And yeah, it's kind of sweet.
Yeah, there was a sweetness to that. There are other points in the film though, like there's a shower scene where inmates they're quick to get into arguments, they're hot-headed. While they're not outwardly showing any kind of like tenderness or emotion, they're willing to push each other around and be quick to get in arguments. There's a scene where somebody takes another person's seat and he gets told, hey, if you do that again, I'm going to bounce you all over the floor. And that's what the inmate code would put out there. It's about status. Don't mess with me. Don't step on my status, or I'm going to step on you.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I think that's one of the ones that definitely permeates throughout all inmate/prison movies, and it is very factual about what the hell goes on. Just the implication of any disrespect to one's status inside the institution could lead to a fight. And it's something that new inmates have to learn right away, that, what is considered disrespectful inside an institution and why you should not do that. But it was definitely in that movie.
Yeah. And it's something that's gone on for like more than 50 years at this point, that has carried itself into present day. This idea, like with Dragline, anytime somebody challenges his authority, like Luke tells him to shut up when he keeps talking about Lucille, and he goes, let's fight. We're going to fight. Or there's these hyper masculine behaviors, like these risk-taking behaviors, such as like Luke keeps standing up to Dragline in the fight, keeps getting knocked down, and other people, including Dragline, respect him more for it. Or he eats 50 eggs, which is a risky behavior because you're going to feel like shit. And he's given praise. He's given respect. Like people are objectifying women. That I would also classify that as very hyper masculine. Sassing the captain openly in front of other inmates, just taunting. And the captain beats him when he taunts the captain. And this happens right before his, what we have here is a failure to communicate speech, which growing up, my father used much more than I would care to ever have heard. It was too irritating. Not the beating part, but he would constantly quote, "What we have here is a failure to communicate," and it's annoying to my ears at this point.
Yes, yeah. Like when I heard it in the film, I was like, ugh.
Some man you just can't reach.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it is so iconic, that line, that you know what movie it's from as soon as you hear it.
Right. And we should definitely give a shout out to Strother Martin as the captain, who was just absolutely spellbinding. Like he was magnetic to watch for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He's only in the film for like 5 to 10 minutes total.
Yeah.
But when he's on the screen, you're watching him.
But I mean, I feel like his presence is always felt because, when we first meet him, he kind of sets up like all of the rules for Luke and like what's going to happen to him if he does certain things. And so like his presence is always felt because his rules are always in place and he's always being watched by his men.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And it's very interesting that quote, as much as it drives you insane, how how there's a lot of, it has a lot of oomph to it because it's still around in societies. People still use it. I mean, how Guns N' Roses used it for one of their songs, right? In Civil War. It's been in movies. Other movies have used it. I mean, hell, I think, I think there was, I think an animated movie used part of it in a scene. I can't remember which one it was, but it gets used all the time in popular culture. There are references to it.
I was wondering about it. So watching it this time, the captain says that line, and then it's echoed again at the end of the film. So Luke, he escapes for a third time. So throughout the film, Luke escapes a few times, punished. They break him. He turns out he's not broken. He escapes again, and then he escapes again, even though they keep penalizing him more and more each time. And the third time he escapes, they're hiding out in a church, him and Dragline, and the cops and the captain pull up, and they say, "All right, come on out." And Luke says, "What we have here is a failure to communicate." Bang! They shoot him, and they get him fatally, we learn. But I wonder if they used that because the movie knew, like the producers knew exactly the strength of that line, and they knew what they had. So they're just reiterating it to push it into the audience's heads.
Yeah, it's got to be one of the most popular lines, ever in film history. It really, it's got to be up there with like "I'll be back." Whatever. It's though it's we're getting close. I mean, how old is this movie?
1967. So what is that?
57 years.
57 years. Yeah. And it's still that, we still have bits of it and blurbs of that line popping up. So it's an iconic line.
Yeah. I do want to touch on a couple more things before we close out our segment on this film. So Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 4 stars. He saw it as an anti-establishment film mirroring some of the anti-establishment themes of the time in opposition to the Vietnam War in 1967. And in his review, he said, all these years after the release of Cool Hand Luke in 1967, all you have to do is say, what we have here is a failure to communicate. Everyone knows the line, and everyone can identify the film, even those who may not have seen it. And here's the curious part. As they make the connection, they'll invariably smile, as if recalling a pleasant experience, a good time at the movies. Have you seen Cool Hand Luke lately? I have. Rarely has an important movie star suffered more in a film wall-to-wall with physical punishment, psychological cruelty, hopelessness, and equal parts of sadism and masochism. I think he's right. We also started to talk earlier about George Kennedy, and he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of Dragline in this film. He's phenomenal. I knew him best as a youth from the Naked Gun characters. He was the supervisor.
Yeah. Yep.
He's had a weird career. He was in early disaster movie hits like Airport 75, Airport 77, Airport 79. It's crazy that they had 3 airport movies.
It was very strange.
He was also the sheriff in Nightmare at Noon, where the scientists poison the water in a small town and it makes all the residents homicidal. That was interesting. Perhaps most importantly, he was a guy on a boat in this movie called Uninvited. It's a haunted cat puppet movie where there's a cat that gets infected with a genetically engineered virus who escapes from a lab and goes on a killing spree on a businessman's yacht. It's incredible. Highly recommend it to everyone in the audience who enjoys a bad film. Now, any final thoughts that you two have about Cool Hand Luke?
No. Do we all want to give it a rating?
Let's.
Because I usually give a rating. How many soups would you give this bad boy?
I give it 3.5. I enjoy the film. I think it does drag at times, and it while the acting is superb, it suffers a bit from like a lack of a strong plot. It's got strong characters, but the plot and the long tracking shots of people hacking weeds on the side of a road. At times I was wishing it would hurry up a little bit. It does have a slower pacing, but it is excellent in all other regards.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this the other day, how like a lot of films from like the 60s and 70s do have kind of this pacing issue where it's and also a lot of films from this era have like a lack of plot, and they're more just like following a character, and it's kind of a character study of a movie.
Yes, and it's not so much a knock on the. I guess it is a knock on the film, but it like of the standards of the time, it was probably considered like a fast-paced film. But the standards of 2024, it does not have the pacing that even like a 2020 film would have.
For sure.
Eric, your thoughts?
Well, how many soups are we allowed to give here?
5.
We're going out of 5.
5. Okay. And you gave it a 3.5?
Yeah, I like the film quite a bit, but again, pacing.
Okay. Wow, you're just not a very patient person, are you? I think that part of that is trying to get you to understand how boring and mundane prison life is, and that it's just slow burn this whole time you're locked up. And so I'm looking at maybe 4.25 soups here, because it's a powerful one, and I think it does a great job of showing prison life in the South for a while, and that farm style prison that we had. Now, what I think, if I'm going to attack the film, one of the things I'm going to do is attack it for its lack of diversity. This is like a Friends prison in Florida. where are the black inmates in the South? Which we know this is supposed to be, early 1900s, right? When's it's supposed to be set in the it's set in the mid 1900s, so late 1940s, 1950s, I believe, something like that. We know that the prison systems were dominated with black inmates. So I do think that's an issue, but I mean, that's more a reflection of what's going on in Hollywood. So in the late 60s. So, but yeah, I think it's a pretty damn good movie.
Yeah,
Agreed.
It was.
Producer Brit?
I gave it 3.5 as well. Same issues as you, basically pacing. The acting was great. The music was really good. Cinematography was wonderful. It was just an altogether good film, but it dragged a little bit for me, and it was a little bit tedious at times. And also, like, I don't know, the film has been so lampooned and spoofed by so many things. Watching it, it's one of those films like you feel like you've watched it recently just because you get so many of the references,
Yes. And that's, to be fair, that's not the film's fault.
Not at all.
Because
no.
it is so
that's
iconic
culture's
that
fault.
it spurred all this, but it is also harder to watch with the cultural context that we have now versus like going in blank slate 1967.
Yeah. It's like watching Star Wars for the first time as an adult.
Or Star Trek, because they're the same as we know.
Yeah, exactly the same. No difference. All fantasy. Yeah.
Now, Eric, would you like to lead a discussion on our second film, 1999's Life? Tell us about the film. Tell us, give us a summary.
All right. So our next movie, Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence is starring in the movie Life, where two buddies from New York end up, or I guess I should say in the early 30s, end up leaving New York for what they hope is a easy score by heading down south to buy some hooch to return to New York City and make some good money off of it. So they can pay off their debt bootlegging. Right? But while hanging out in the South, They are accused of committing a horrible crime and are sentenced to life in prison on a Mississippi prison farm. All right. And again, to start off with this one, the farm where they're at is extremely representative of what was going on during a time. If you think what I just mentioned about Cool Hand Luke, this movie gets right in terms of the inmate population in the South. Extremely, we're looking at a state that was dominated in the criminal justice system by racist individuals. And, we have two individuals that did not commit the crime of murder, which they were convicted of, supposedly, but it was a wrongful conviction. And they get to prison, and the overwhelming majority of the inmates look just like them. It's a great example of the trustee system, where inmates who were seen as being well behaved actually work as the staff, and they are given guns, and they are used to help control the other inmates. In exchange, they're given more access to privileges, have better housing, if you want to call it that, because it wasn't anything all that great, but run around with inmates with guns. And a lot of times you hear that folks that were picked for that were actually the one-time murderers, because that was the only crime they committed. They're still kind of conformists. While in prison, they don't cause a lot of problems. They're not like the individuals who are in there committing a bunch of crimes, who are into a lifestyle of criminal behavior. But this movie does a great job of showing the way life was in the South in these Southern prisons. Obviously, there's a lot of comedy in there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good laughs. But it goes through their adventures of trying to escape over and over and over so that they can return to New York.
Thank you. That was an excellent synopsis. Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to add to the discussion of trustees. So another reason that they made trustees, they made murderers the trustees more often, is because trustees were the guys who were given guns, and they wanted to give the guns to people that they knew were capable of violence. They knew, okay, you've killed someone, so we know that you're capable of inflicting violence on inmates here. If it comes down to it, if it comes down to brass tacks, you are going to shoot that guy. And often in the South, they would give a full pardon to an inmate who shot an escaping inmate, a trustee who shot an escaping inmate. And so it was seen as like a job qualification almost for trustees. Are you capable of shooting your fellow inmate in an act of serious violence for them escaping? Yes, check. All right, you're hired. That kind of idea.
It's weird that they would just incentivize murder like that.
There's a lot of weird things about the prison system now.
I mean, come on, this is the United States. Is it really that weird?
I mean, I guess it would be weird in this day and age, but this takes place starts in the 1930s or 30s, because it's prohibition.
1932.
Yeah.
Now, in this film, I feel like Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence are playing characters that we've seen before. Eddie Murphy is playing the same swaggering type of con guy that we've seen in. I feel like it's almost the same character he's been playing since like the first Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah.
Slick, fast talking guy. Yeah,
a guy who knows how to hustle, but he's likable, mm-hmm. but he's also seen as like, come on, we've heard this before. We know that you're full of shit, something on those lines, but he's likable. And then the other, so he plays Ray. The other character played by Martin Lawrence, Claude, I feel like Martin Lawrence has to be used in a buddy film, because on his own in films, he ends up like in Dark Knight or Rebound or just dog shit.
Yeah.
As a buddy in a film, he's terrific. He's exactly who you want.
He's the dejected partner. He's the guy who's always going, what? That's his job.
He's there as a reaction to some outlandish other partner. Yes. Yeah. So you put him in like a Bad Boys or a Life, and great. I like that. But he's playing more of the straight man to Eddie Murphy's like slick talking hustler.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he does a good job of it, because it's, I think part of the reason why he's typecast in that, because that when he had that series that series that he had, it was called Martin, right?
Yeah.
He was always being beaten down by the character, his wife's character, and he was always being put in his place by her, and so it's believable. And, from one time he's there, he's not the stronger character in Cops. He's not the stronger character here. So it is a common theme we see amongst him.
Yes, indeed. It's his classic role. It's where we want him. And he's like, he takes the role on, and I like watching him in this. Now, in the prison camp, we see Ray and Claude. They're constantly forced to work, digging ditches with pickaxes. They're shoveling dirt. They're doing other menial tasks. The prison camp is all black inmates, which for the 1930s in Mississippi, we know that, like, to present day, we have very, very, very disproportionate representation of African Americans in the prison system. This is going to show much of that. If we look to the South during the Reconstruction era, following the Civil War, the South is decimated. They're trying to rebuild their cities. They're trying to rebuild their towns, and they don't have slaves to do that anymore. And so we had laws like the Black Codes and Jim Crow laws that would pick up black citizens, especially in the South, and people would often be convicted without trial. Here they did get a trial, but it seems like not much of a trial. We don't really get subject to see any of that. And the gentlemen are convicted for murder, sentenced to life, and just thrown in this prison camp to do labor. Let's see. I noted a few instances of hypermasculinity throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
Hop and Bob and the corrections officers, they demonstrate very little mercy on the inmates who take a break from routine. Like Claude says, "Oh, it's too hot to work," and Ray gets hit back for talking to a CO. Or like Ray reads a letter to an inmate at one point, and the inmate can't read. Inmate learns his whole family has died, doesn't show any emotion. There are these seen as these New York City boys who are kind of castigated from everyone else because of their sophistication, which doesn't really work to their favor in prison, where it's seen as, oh, we're not these city boys like you. And they also they try and talk themselves up. They say, oh, we were on a big murder spree going all over the United States to try and build their reputation. Where you really see it, though, is in Eric's favorite scene, where this big inmate named Goldmouth says something like, Eric, will you give it to us?
Maybe I'll eat your cornbread.
There you go.
Yeah. That scene, and even the scene right before that with Jangle Egg and a little bit of Biscuit, starting to see what's going on where Jangle Egg is, kind of hitting on, he's hitting on Claude in that scene where he's, Ray is reading, and that then leads into the scene with the fight over the cornbread. Is that scene right there is, I think it does a great job of us being able to illustrate for our students the different statuses that exist. So you have, that. You just have that massive inmate who all prisons generally have somebody who is just huge and is able to physically intimidate people. They didn't even have to turn to violence. Just their physical stature itself is threatening enough to get them to exploit other inmates. Well, Ray does, Eddie Murphy's character, Ray, does the right thing, and he tries to fight him just to know that he's not an easy mark. So that's somebody who could be then considered as strong inside the inmate subculture, because you can't just easily walk all over them to take what you want. Whereas, Claude, on the other hand, was willing to give up the cornbread. As he said, he's going to be, he's going to end up being a little bitch if he does that. And so it does a great job of showing us those different roles. And then you get to see at the end of that fight, you get to see the individual who's really running the prison when he busts up the fight and he tells them, all right, you've had enough. And let's take him on back to the bunk so that he can rest up, and that he's proven, and they've proven their point about it, and he knows he's not just somebody who can easily be walked over. So there's a bunch of different roles or statuses that you can point out there in that scene. It does a great job. My other favorite scene is when when Martin Lawrence's character Claude steals the pie, and he crosses the gun line to steal the pie, and he's running back eating the pie.
Yeah, that's when he's like super old too.
Yeah, he's all old and he's making these weird sounds as he's eating it. I don't know, for some reason both of those just always make me laugh.
I got the impression that he's making the weird sounds because it's a super hot pie. And
so there is that.
It's so good, and it's super hot, and he's breaking the rules and running, and so it's just
interestingly, I saw this as a perfect, in terms of a double feature, Life and Cool Hand Luke together. They both portray a sense of what prison might have been like in the 1930s, but Cool Hand Luke for this all white prison population, whereas Life for this all black prison population.
Yeah.
And I was speaking of Cool Hand Luke, I was just going to mention that fight scene that we just talked about. I think is like a direct homage to Cool Hand Luke in the dragline fight scene, because once again we have like the weaker character refusing to give up, and proving themselves and their toughness in the prison.
Yeah,
I totally agree. Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, what is a prison movie without a fight scene? I mean, can you have a prison movie without a fight? I mean, what was?
Yeah, like the women in prison movies. A lot of those don't have fight scenes. They replace them with shower scenes, which is fine with me. Fine with me.
That's all right. But I'm thinking about, what was it, Stan? Where
Big Stan. Oh God, we don't talk about that movie.
One realistic element I liked that was present in both Cool Hand Luke and Life is doing count. So it's such a big part of prison operations, where inmates are counted coming in, inmates are counted when they're going out to work, and both of them showed count, and it was more of a background feature in Cool Hand Luke. The only way it was really pulled into play in Life is they used little chits, little stones, for counting each inmate. Each inmate has a stone. They put it in your hand, and they hand it to you on the way to the work site, and then you're using it to count how many there are coming back. And at one point, Claude and Ray escape. They run past the gun line into the woods, and they're starting to get away. They're eventually caught, but they had stolen their stones from pickpocketing one of the trustees who was holding them at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how it was a great little plan that worked, and talk about the different ways we count people at institutions, and how it's become so much more technologically advanced over the years. But there's still, because I think, as I mentioned, the prison I was at, the Green River Correctional Complex, was for a lot of years, and I know nobody associates technological advancement with the state of Kentucky, but at the time it was the most technologically advanced prison in America. So we had Department of Corrections coming from all over the country to look at it. We had people from Canada come look at it. They wanted to see this technological marvel, and they put it in Tornado Alley. And so it was consistent that the prison would lose power. And then you have to revert back to the old methods of counting, going through and having some system that would actually work, and where you, even if it's taking a piece of paper and marking down as you go to ensure that count is correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And the count is such an important part that, like, you have to do at least once a shift. Another piece I want to touch on here is the movie's surprisingly good portrayal of Biscuit. It's either an inmate dressing in drag or a trans inmate. It never really makes that clear.
Yeah.
And she's actually, assuming she is the
We'll
pronoun
go with they.
using.
We'll go with they.
They. All right, we'll go with they. That's good. They are actually treated somewhat with sensitivity by the film. They're worried about returning home on release and how they're going to be treated. And Biscuit, because of that, like Biscuit gets the release papers and says, I can't handle this. Like, I don't know how I'm going to be treated back home, and runs past the gun line and is shot and killed by a trustee. It was sad, but the character was actually handled with sensitivity, and I didn't expect that for a 1999 film, and 2, for a film set in the era of the 1930s to probably 60s or 70s.
Right. And in a film directed by the guy who did Yo MTV Raps.
Oh, really? I did not know that. That's a lot of fun.
Right.
MTV Raps was such a good show.
Of course,
we never missed that as kids. Oh my goodness, that was. I mean, if you were going to see the cutting edge hip hop of the day, you had to go to MTV Raps. There was no other show. I mean, MTV wouldn't. At that time, they would not put rap videos on during the day. You had to wait till Friday nights till UMTV Raps came on.
A quick aside, Bronson or brother, have you seen the movie Who's the Man, starring Dr. Dre and Ed Lover from UMTV Raps?
No, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I got it on my server. They play cops, and it's Ted Dems who directed this film. It's his very first film.
This is right up my alley. So we have to end the podcast shortly, but I do want to point out a couple things before we get to ratings. One, the movie ends on a very strange note with Claude and Ray escaping. Like they set fire, or they at least escaped during a fire in the medical ward. They're old men, and we see them at a Yankees game, and it's playing the song "What Would You Do" by City High.
No. Excuse me. The song is called "Life."
The song is called "What Would You Do," isn't it?
No. The song is actually called "Life." I'm not kidding.
Oh, I don't like that.
And so the reason it's in this film, talk about the music real quick. So the music for this film is done partially by Wyclef Jean, but mostly by none other than disgraced prisoner R. Kelly.
What?
And he produced the song "Life," and so that's why it's in the film.
Oh my!
That is wild.
Yeah.
All right, my mind is now blown. So Roger Ebert gave this film 3 out of 4 stars. He said Murphy and Lawrence are so persuasive in the movie that maybe audiences will be carried along. Their characters are likable, their performances are touching, they age well, they survive. I appreciate that. I would give the film 3.25 stars. I liked it. I liked Cool Hand Luke a little more in that it is more of a classic. Both films are plagued by lack of a hard story running through. I want more of a plot, but Murphy and Lawrence were very likable, and I enjoyed watching them. What about you two?
Well, I'm gonna go ahead. Because you gave stars that time. What happened to Soups?
Yeah, come on,
Soups. 3.25 Soups. Okay.
Well, just simply because of how often I watch this, it's damn near every semester. I'm always showing this one in my classes. There are a few scenes that I use, but definitely the fight scene and the again, doing a good job of showing that here are some sophisticated inmates coming from New York because they can read. Showing all those different aspects, showing the trustee system that existed. I have to, I absolutely love this film. So I give it 4.5 Soups.
Damn.
Wow.
Yeah.
More than Cool Hand Luke.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I like this one more than Cool Hand Luke. You got to remember, I'm in the slapstick, stupid humor. My monkey brain gets that stuff.
I guess it's not so controversial now, but I am going to have to agree. I actually liked watching Life better than Cool Hand Luke. I understand Cool Hand Luke's probably a better film objectively, and it's got a lot more history behind it. And without Cool Hand Luke, we probably would have never gotten Life.
Sure.
But Life was just a much more modern film. It didn't have any of the pitfalls of Cool Hand Luke, like the second act slog, or the kind of I don't know, dull pacing and like atmosphere at times. The jokes pretty much all landed. I thought they actually handled everything politically pretty well. Overall, I enjoyed watching it more. 4 soups for me.
All right, so that is our take on the films Cool Hand Luke and Life.
Mm-hmm.
There's no movie minute this week because we just spent movie hour, and with that, we're going to wrap up the podcast. Please like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. This has been Prison Breakdown. I'm Professor Strah.
And I'm Professor Eric Bronson. That's
Lights out.
Don't give me this, don't give me lip. That's what you get when you act a fool. Just one of these days, you're gonna get paid. Better watch your back, it's gonna get personal. Don't give me this, don't give me lip. That's what you get when you act a fool. Just one of these days, you're gonna get paid. Better watch your back, it's gonna get personal. 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 Better watch your back. 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 Don't give me this. Don't give me lip. That's what you get when you act a fool. Just one of these days, you're gonna get paid. Better watch your back. It's gonna get personal. Don't give me this. Don't give me this. Don't give me this. Don't give me this. Just one of these days. It's gonna get personal.